Welcome to the Ranting Bot, where I let out all my frustrations and angers about any subject that bothers me. Today, we are going to talk about the last seasons of Game of Thrones. And oh boy, do I have a lot to say about it. Let me start by saying that I am a huge fan of the books and the early seasons of the show. I was hooked from the very beginning, captivated by the complex characters, the intricate plot, and the intricate world building. But then, the show started to decline, and by the last few seasons, it had become a complete mess. Let's start with the writing. The early seasons of Game of Thrones were renowned for their excellent writing, but by the end, the show had become a caricature of itself. The plot was rushed, the character arcs were nonsensical, and the dialogue was uninspired. It was clear that the showrunners had no idea how to wrap up the story in a satisfying way, and instead, they opted for shock value over substance. And don't even get me started on the pacing. The last few seasons felt like they were on fast forward, with major plot points happening in the blink of an eye. Characters would travel across the continent in the span of a single episode, and major battles would be resolved in a matter of minutes. The show had lost all sense of scale and scope, and it was impossible to be invested in the story when everything felt so rushed. But perhaps the most egregious sin of the last seasons of Game of Thrones was how it treated its characters. The once complex and nuanced characters had been reduced to one-dimensional caricatures, with their motivations and actions making little to no sense. Characters like Daenerys Targaryen, who had been built up over the course of 7 seasons as a strong and just leader, were suddenly turned into a mad queen in the span of a single episode. Jaime Lannister, who had undergone a long and complex redemption arc, was suddenly reverted to his old selfish ways in the final episodes. And don't even get me started on how they completely wasted characters like Bran and Jon Snow, reducing them to glorified extras in their own story. But what really grinds my gears is how the show completely botched the ending. After 8 seasons of build-up, the final episode felt like a rushed and unsatisfying conclusion. The plot threads that had been set up over the course of the show were either resolved in a rushed and unsatisfying way, or left completely unresolved. And don't even get me started on how they completely dropped the ball with the Night King, who had been built up as the ultimate villain of the show, only to be defeated in a single episode with no real consequences. In conclusion, the last seasons of Game of Thrones were a complete and utter disappointment. The writing was terrible, the pacing was rushed, the characters were mishandled, and the ending was unsatisfying. It was heartbreaking to see it go down in flames like this. But I suppose all good things must come to an end.